Stories. We have heard them told for as long as we can remember. From infancy to adulthood, we've had them read to us. We read them ourselves, and we read them to others. Fairy tales, nursery rhymes, family stories, Bible stories. Stories tell us the why, what, and how of the world we live in. Heroes, villains, adventure, fantasy. Stories can capture our imaginations and capture our hearts. Grana was a master storyteller. She had a natural flair for the dramatic and channeled this God-given talent into recounting her memories and family tales. She loved telling us about her life, her children, and extended family. She had an amazing memory for detail, and she would tell you a story in such a way that you would feel like you were there, experiencing it all, and that you were closely acquainted to the characters in her tellings. She would often repeat her favourite stories. They were told often for emphasis, I think, to underline a lesson or a point she wanted you to understand. The best thing about Grana's stories is that they were true accounts from her life experience or the experience of loved ones. Grana knew the importance of family, and her sharing stories was a way for her to connect to her loved ones, pass on wisdom, and pass on the legacy of family. The best stories capture our hearts and connect us to the characters. Infused with love, Grana's stories connected us to the people in her tales. Through these stories I got to know Queen Lillian Bosch, her determined, resourceful and faithful mother, and her father, Charles Louis Martin, a kind, softly spoken gentleman with delphinium blue eyes. I learned about Grandy's gentlemanly charm and about how, after much effort and cajoling, Grandy eventually convinced Grana to marry him. Grandy, of course, tells the story a little differently. I learnt about my spunky and determined Auntie Bev, who from a very young age asserted her independence and let no one take advantage of her. I especially love the story of how Auntie Bev defended her big sister, my mum, against a bully by chasing him down the street with a tennis racket in her hand. When it comes to Uncle Craig, the first story that comes to mind starts with these words. Uncle Craig, here comes another one. And then he would stretch his long legs and chase after his cheeky niece. Of course we are talking about yours truly, and I don't have to spell out what the another one was referring to. And then there are the stories of my beautiful mother singing on the on-the-go show in the dress Grana made out of newspaper, wowing the crowd with her talents, or the story of when my mum became Port Elizabeth's Miss Personality, capturing the hearts of the audience with her vivacious charm. Infused with love, Grana's stories capture our hearts and strengthen the bonds of family. The best stories teach and inspire us. Grana's stories were often filled with messages to teach and inspire us to be better people. They spoke of the relationships she had with the people she loved and the lessons she learned from them. She loved her paternal grandmother, Mary Thompson, whose kindness and generosity during the difficult time of the Great Depression deeply impressed and influenced Grana for the better. Grana was one of the kindest and most generous souls I ever knew. Grana learned about how to be a Christian from her mother, Queenie. Her mother read her the Bible, took her to church, but most importantly, her mother lived her beliefs. It was this example of unyielding faith and goodness that had a profound influence on Grana, and she did her best to pass on the wisdom and faith of her mother to her children and grandchildren. I can attest of Grana's unwavering faith and virtue, which impacted my life for the better and has blessed me immeasurably. Grana's stories teach and inspire us to be better people. The best stories keep alive the legacy of family. Grana passed on many stories about her ancestors, loved ones she had never met, but whose courage, kindness, and sacrifice were kept alive in stories passed down from one generation to another. One story that stands out is the one of the mysterious disappearance of her great-grandmother, Catherine Lacey, from Kilkenny Island. Grana didn't know Catherine Lacey, but she got to know about Catherine through her story. It seems that Grana's paternal grandmother, Mary Thompson, liked to tell stories too. I remember Grana enthusiastically retelling this tale with a certain reverence and awe. This was a true account of Catherine Lacey, who at the tender age of 16 left her home in Ireland, seeking a new life in colonial South Africa. After an uncertain beginning, Catherine met and married James Martin and began a family. Although I am sure she missed her family in Ireland, Catherine was happy in her new life until tragedy struck. Her beloved son Charles was dying from lead poisoning, an occupational hazard for painters at the time. Catherine, having been at the bedside of her withering son and overcome with grief, wanted to leave the house to be alone. Mary, Charles's wife, suggested Catherine take her grandson, little Charlie, Grana's father, for some fresh air and a walk along the beach. But Catherine refused, evidently too distraught for company. Grana tells that Catherine rattled off into Gaelic, perhaps to express her anguish or to pray. Catherine left her son, grandson, and daughter-in-law that day for the last time, never to be seen again. What happened to Catherine Lacey Martin? Only the Lord knows. But the story doesn't end there. The most dramatic scene from this tale is yet to come. Grana tells that Charles was asleep in bed while his wife Mary was watching over him. I can imagine that the light in the room was dim and that the atmosphere was solemn. I am sure Mary was equally distraught at losing her husband and at the prospect of becoming a widow and a single mother at such a young age. In the silence of the soft light of the room, Charles suddenly bolted upright, reaching his arms at the shadows and crying, "Mama, Mama!" And just as suddenly, he collapsed into the bed and expired his last breath. Grana seemed to delight in this part of the story, perhaps because it played out as deliciously as a ghost story, or perhaps because it was her belief that even as Charles was about to die, he knew that he would see his mother again. There are so many unanswered questions in this story, which makes for an intriguing mystery. But there are also things in this story that paint a clear picture of who Catherine was, a woman of great courage and a mother who cared deeply for her son. Why tell this story? Isn't this supposed to be about Grana? I tell you this because Catherine's story is Grana's story, and every story that Grana ever told us about her family. Perhaps she didn't even realize it, but each story Grana told us was like a thread in the tapestry of her family legacy. Grana's stories keep alive the legacy of family. Grana's family, past, present, and future, meant everything to her. She was proud of her children and even more proud of her grandchildren and great-grandchildren. Her children and grandchildren were the cleverest, the most beautiful, the most amazing, bestest people in the world. Of course, Grana was biased in her assessments. Some of us might even have rolled our eyes a time or two thinking, "Here she goes again." But can any of us doubt her love for us? And we loved her for her loving heart, her generosity, her thoughtfulness, her determination, her faithfulness, her smile, and her laughter. We loved her for her sense of humor, her sense of style, her fastidiousness and fanciness. She was our own Fancy Nancy, who liked things to be just so. But mostly, I think we loved her because she loved us first and never stopped loving us. What greater legacy can a person pass on to the next generations than the legacy of love? Grana's stories were her legacy of love. Although Grana has passed from this life, we are comforted in the knowledge that we will see her again. And until that wonderful day, she will ever be alive in our hearts. When I see a full moon, smell the sweet fragrance of lavender, or hear the soothing words of her lullaby, she is with me. My hope is that we continue telling her stories to the next generations, that like Catherine Lacey, Grana will live on through her stories to the 7th generation and beyond. May we all honor our beloved mother, grandmother, and great-grandmother by keeping her memory alive through her legacy of love.